very much for coming out this afternoon. My name is Hannah Paul, and I am a journalist and curator of the Women of the World Festival at the Southbank Centre, and I'm also chair of the grassroots feminist organisation UK Feminista, and I'm just delighted to be here to chair this opening session of the London Feminist Film Festival. Obviously we've just seen 3 incredibly powerful films, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion that we're going to have. In a few minutes I'm going to introduce the speakers. We're going to have a bit of a kind of conversation between us, and then there's going to be plenty of time afterwards for you to have audience Q&A. There is a roving mic, so don't worry, there'll be plenty of time for you to interact with the speakers. So I'm a bit shell-shocked after those great films. Okay, so the speakers in order of who's sitting next to me. Next to me here we have Kate Smurthwaite. Kate is the media spokesperson for abortion rights. You may also know her as a stand-up comedian. Yes. Okay. Next to Kate we have Rebecca Sesny. Rebecca is the director of Still Fighting, which is the film that you just saw. Rebecca is a multimedia journalist and specialises in human rights reporting. And then next to Rebecca we have Elizabeth Gezahegn-King. Elizabeth is Africa Programme Manager for Forward, who campaign amongst other things on FGM and child marriage. So that's who we have today. Okay, so I'm going to start, as we just saw your film actually, Rebecca, I'm going to start with you. Can you just first of all just give us a little bit of an idea of what it is that you're campaigning about at the moment?
Well, currently, this one, I think it is. Okay. Currently, I'm actually switched gears a little bit. I do a lot of human rights films.
So, better? Can you guys hear me?
Okay. I'm going into pre-production right now for a film that I'm doing in the States about income disparity amongst immigrants in very wealthy communities. So I've switched gears a little bit, but this was my first film that I did, and I just finished that in June, the one that you just saw. So,
great. Okay, and Elizabeth, what are you particularly working on at the moment?
In relation to FGM, the tribe you saw in Korean tribe, which is also not just in Kenya, but northwestern part of Tanzania. So we're working with that tribe since 2008. So the FGM season starts in December. And last year we got a lot of local authority support, but now they told us they won't do that anymore. So we are collecting petitions, and we want to appeal to the Higher Commission in Tanzania and Higher Commission in London, and also put a lot of international influence from this side.
Okay, thank you. And Kate?
Yeah, so I mean, as ever, I'm involved with a lot of different campaigns, but in terms of abortion rights and the work that we're doing at the moment, there's a few things. Firstly, although our current government overall appears to be just about pro-choice, not nearly as pro-choice as the population, various recent attempts to make abortion less accessible in the UK have been unsuccessful, but there are a number of politicians still in the UK who really think that abortion is their number one priority and who are very strongly anti-choice, people like Nadine Dorries and co. And now we still have a health secretary who is very clearly anti-choice. So we're sort of often on the back foot fighting against the amendments which they put up and the various obstacles that they put up. Actually, given a more pro-choice government, given more pro-choice MPs, what we would really like to do is improve access in the UK, by which I mean about 4 things. I mean legalising in Northern Ireland, I mean getting rid of the requirement for 2 doctors' signatures in the UK, getting rid of the requirement for a second clinic visit for early term medical abortion, dealing with the crisis pregnancy clinics that have sprung up, especially on university campuses, handing out false information funded by fundamentalist religious groups. There's quite a few things that I would like to do to improve the situation, even very simple things that we could do if we can't legalise in Northern Ireland. What we could do is make it so that when women travel over from Northern Ireland, they don't have to pay for the medical procedures that they have in this country, which typically £600 to £2,000. And that's a lot more than your Ryanair fare. It's quite a sorry state of affairs where Michael O'Leary is a better friend of women in need than the health secretary. But the other thing that we're having to fight, and that we're continuing to fight, is that the picture that you see painted from the US, absolutely horrifying and terrifying, is spreading to this country. And about 4 or 5 years ago, we started to see protesters regularly stood outside clinics, a group called 40 Days for Life, who will stand there and wave their rosary beads and pray for you. And then within the last couple of years, we've had the slightly more extreme protesters, a group called Abort 67, who stand outside clinics. Initially they've been in Brighton for a long time, they're now in Edinburgh, they've appeared in a few other clinics around the country, and they're the ones who hold up the very graphic images and this kind of stuff and shout at people, and they have been harassing people, and they've also been trying to film people going to clinics and doing all this kind of stuff. So the tactics that you're seeing happening in the US, we're not quite at that stage most of the time yet, but it's definitely starting to move that way. So I think increasingly things like clinic escorts are going to become a reality in the UK as well.
Thank you very much. Rebecca, the narrative, both the visual narrative and actually often a lot of the language around the issues in the film is very much kind of hijacked actually by the anti-choice sort of lobby. What was your thinking in doing this particular film in this way?
I think what I really wanted to show was as much as you can of being a woman who's going through it, from the side of kind of like the backs of the protesters. You see a lot of them, but you hear a lot of them screaming, but I really wanted to give you a sense of this is what a woman in the US in almost every clinic has to go through to get through, even for a very simple medical procedure such as a pap smear or just a pregnancy test. They deal with that, and then on the other side are the clinic escorts. So that's really where I was coming from with that.
And what's been the response to the film?
Thus far, it's been a lot of, I guess I would say, shock that in the U.S., New York is considered very liberal. We're in the Northeast. That's probably the biggest response that I get, is that there's a lot of problems in the Northeast with harassment, and people expect that in the South. I don't know if anyone here is from the South in the U.S., but it's a very Christian Baptist area, and so that's usually the main response that I get to the film.
So people are surprised that it goes on somewhere as liberal as New York.
Exactly.
In terms of the escorts. And Kate, you were saying you think that we do you know of escorts that exist so far here?
No, we don't have, I'm not aware of anybody in the UK currently doing direct clinic escorting, although that said, it is obviously happening on an ad hoc basis. Like when you see protesters outside the clinic, you're much more likely to ask your friend or your sister to come with you. So it definitely at some level is happening, in the sense that people say, oh, actually, I just went up to the clinic and I kind of got nervous, and now you ask a friend. And if you saw the Brighton Argos a few months ago, there was an amazing front page story. They had a handwritten letter from a woman who'd been raped and had then gone to the clinic and been screamed at and all this kind of stuff, and talking about how judged she felt and how horrible it was and how she felt safe seeking this medical advice, and suddenly she felt a threat again. So it's definitely, there is a way in which it's happening, but it's not quite happening that directly. We do have counter-protests, and what we tend to advise, and the feedback we have from clinics, is that when there is a protest outside, sometimes a counter-protest just makes more noise and more fuss, and it sort of increases the problem rather than solving it. So what we tend to do is wait until the clinic is closed, that these protesters are still there, and then we go and have a counter-protest. And in particular, the 40 Days for Life people, they will do 40 days of praying outside a clinic, and then they'll finish with a big religious service, and like the Catholic Bishop of Westminster led the one in Bloomsbury, it's huge. And so they'll have like a couple of hundred, mostly men there, actually holding a full religious service. So the last time they did that, about 400 of us showed up, and we brought a samba band. So that kind of spoiled the fun.
Okay, Elizabeth, I wanted to come to you now. What are your, I don't know if you've seen that film before or not, but what are your immediate responses when you're watching that film, the cut?
I think I was really pleased. I haven't seen it before, it's my first time. But it's the reality, because that's what we've been hearing from the girls and from the community the last few years. So it was really the reality. And also, even though I heard, it's almost my day-to-day life the last 5 years, to look at the girls, being cut and looking at their face, dreadful, and they have to go through that painful situation, and yet they're not allowed to cry because that's shameful for the family, and that really, really hurts me, and it was really a powerful film.
For me, one of the most powerful elements of that film is that it's by a Kenyan woman, and it's Kenyan speaking about a situation in Kenya, rather than being somebody from the West kind of being parachuted in and then commenting on something. To me, that's what makes it. And you see all sides of the conversation. You see all sides of life. You see, whether it's the old women. It's not so much about demonizing. It's very much about the day-to-day, almost the banality actually of it, and that's what makes it really powerful. Can you just talk about what are some of the problems when you're dealing with the media, particularly in the West, and an issue like FGM?
In the UK?
Yeah.
I'm sure most of you are aware of the last few months, you could say, or last year, there's a lot of media coverage on FGM, which is very good because, that's what we've been looking forward to. But sometimes it's one side of story. And that really worries because, this film, it covers everyone. Like there was traditionally there was circumciser, there was, the medical people, it touched everyone. So the story should show the whole side. It should show also what the community feel, what the parents feel, why do they do this? You don't see that part on the media most of the time. It's barbaric and they do it, it's they.
And it's something over there
yes.
that people do
yes.
to each other.
Yes. So that's really worrying because as you can see, it's been happening for the last 4 centuries. Nobody knows when it started. So if you don't work, if you don't involve the parents, if you don't involve the community, you're pushing them to the extreme. So that's a bit worrying.
There has been a lot of media coverage about the campaigns, which is great, and a lot of it that's less great. Can you just tell me where we are right now in terms of the UK and the law and the actuality of FGM?
The law, there was a law since, I think, since the late 80s, but also 2003, it makes it illegal completely. You cannot conduct FGM in the UK, which is very good. But still there are challenges. Many people are focused, especially in some authorities are focused, the reason why there is no prosecution, because there is no prosecution in the UK so far. But
so there hasn't been a single prosecution, even though it's illegal,
yes.
and even though we know it's happening, whether it's happening here or whether girls are being taken,
yes.
There hasn't been a single prosecution.
No.
Why is that?
I think, it's very complicated because we hear from women, or some people call in our office and say, we know some people told us it happens in London, even from some other European countries, they come to London. If there's integrated approach that involves communities, so they take it as, the film we watched now, it belongs from the community, and it's no external people in there. So it's very complex. It's the reason why there is no prosecution has many reasons behind it. Like some people mentioned the French system, they have some prosecution, but the way the medical system they use and what we use in the UK is very different.
So what would you like to see happen? What would be the most effective or powerful change that could happen here towards FGM?
I think there should be education in terms of the community, and at the same time, once you educate them and they know that it's illegal in this country, the system should be in place in NHS and everywhere, every aspect of the system, and also then you can say, this, now it's illegal, so if you do it, then you'll be in trouble. Because what it seems like now is if a girl went for summer holiday and if this happens to her, she has to come and report it. And if I'm 12 or 13 or 14, to report my parents have done, did this to me, it's traumatizing. And also, because of that, because of her, she'll lose her parents, and she'll be blamed for that. So that's not helping. So it should be the other way around. It's not the girl who should, keep an eye on these kind of things. So other medical people or other legal people could be able to identify that, spot that. So the girl will not be blamed that so that will lead to prosecution. So mixture approach would be useful.
There's often a desire after, whether it's a film like that or reading about something like FGM, there's often an understandable and sort of well-meaning desire for people to go and help. Now, sometimes this kind of help can be good help, it can be less good help. What can someone do, having watched a film like that, who feels moved to some sort of action?
There are organizations or campaigners who are doing a lot of work in the UK now. Forward has been around for the last 30 years, but there are also other small campaigning organizations as well. Funding is always a problem. So I think there are many ways to support, individual, because one individual can make a difference, and then when many individuals come together, it's even better, and it gets better in that way.
So there's Forward, obviously. Daughters of Eve is another one who's doing some great work, and I understand also I think that the NSPCC have set up a new line. Is that right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So any kind of help would be useful.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great, thank you. So Rebecca, was this the film that you set out to make? Just jump.
Sure. No problem. I actually I had a little bit of trouble making this film. I had originally approached Planned Parenthood. You see them referenced in the film quite a bit, but they're very, very strict on their public relations, and so they don't really allow a lot of filmmakers to come in. So instead, I ended up doing 2 completely different independent clinics. It had started as wanting me to do just follow one clinic in Mississippi, which is what really inspired the film, because the clinic is about to close, and they just started their clinic escort program. So the clinic is in threat of closing, and they just started this program to help women into the clinic itself, which I thought was fascinating. And then I got in touch with another woman in the North who also had been doing it for many, many years and had been in an experience in Boston with the bombings and the shootings in the early 90s, and I was fascinated by her story and why she still comes. So that's kind of how it all came together.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think is the role of a filmmaker in terms of trying to make a film that's, it's not about being objective necessarily, but as you say, you're trying to go through, you're trying to take the role of the go through the journey through the women's eyes, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily an objective film.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. You don't ever, for me personally as a filmmaker, I don't ever want to sort of put in my own opinion as far as really, really editorializing or commenting on what I see or what happens. There were a couple times where some of the protesters, the scenes that I cut, started harassing me as well, which got a little nerve-wracking, but you don't ever want to sort of make the statement or make a judgment on what you're seeing. I definitely, I feel like you can tell a little bit on what side I maybe fall on, but that definitely wasn't my intention. But the way that it just so happened that the subjects that I chose and the people that I followed happened to be very pro-choice, and so it's told a little bit through their eyes. So I think that's kind of how it happened, but it wasn't necessarily intentional in that way.
Okay, Kate, just to come to you, because I don't want to not talk about the film in the middle, actually, just because it was, that was also an incredibly powerful film actually, and together the films are very much about women's bodies, and also in some ways the violence that's done, whether it's by women or by society to other women, or whether it's by something external that then becomes internal, such as being ill. And I think that's really powerful. I just want to know what your responses were actually to that middle film.
Well, yeah, it's a very short film, and obviously it's a very kind of beautiful little snippet of someone's life, where you see somebody who's been through terrible news and terrible times, finding just a small way to fight back. And what I find interesting about it is that on the one hand, she's standing up to a culture that says she should have long hair and she should smile and be pretty, and she's kind of standing up to that. And then at the same time, there's a sense that she's a human being, and like everybody else, she kind of wants to fit in with the people around her. And that way in which people whose appearance doesn't fit in with what we're expected to look like and what we're supposed to look like can feel really ostracized and really pushed out from society. And I almost wanted it to go on longer, that film, because there was that bit where she was saying, well, I've lost my hair, and now I've sort of painted my head, but I really wanted her to get to the bit where she was saying, but you know what, it's okay to not have hair, and it's okay to have a body that changes and that doesn't conform to certain standards. I really thought that we could have run that film to the point where she was shouting at Gok Wan, and I would have really liked that bit. That would have been my favourite bit. I would really love to take that, because what she is actually doing is to some extent fighting back against the stereotype of here's what women are supposed to look like, and I think, you know, even she mentions it, doesn't it? She says the way that women are constantly like, it's about women's value is on what they look like, and then, you know, men can be valued for lots of other things, but with women, so much of your confidence is supposed to be about what you look like. And then I constantly hear that because I'm a feminist, I should be involved in some kind of body confidence campaign, or I should be a part of some campaign to tell young women that they're all beautiful. And I sort of want to tell young women that they don't actually have to be beautiful. It doesn't really matter. They can be fat and lumpy and saggy and sallow and lopsided and whatever, and that's not what's important. What's important is the other stuff that they do and their contribution to life, yeah.
And absolutely, and there's actually, I think, also a direct correlation. I don't think it's a different conversation talking about the pressures that women feel in terms of their appearance here is exactly the same conversation as if we're looking at the FGM film in Kenya. I don't think that, and yet they're considered to be two very separate ideas.
I have to say, if there's one thing that I found more terrifying than anything about the FGM film, it's that bit where they're talking to these really quite young girls and saying, you know, we encourage you to say no to it. Like, you know, you say you don't want it, and the girls that are saying, I don't want it, they're saying, well, we're going to protect you and make sure. But then there are other young girls of the same age saying, well, I think I do want it. Because it's a peer pressure thing.
How different is that to the peer pressure to have breast implants?
Well, exactly, and that's exactly it. Is I think back to when I was 8, and you know, when I was 8, I have to say, I was a real goody two-shoes. I mean, I really did whatever my parents wanted, and I folded my arms, and I was like, and I just, when I saw those young girls, I really thought, I know at that age, I would have said, oh, what, and you think it's a good idea? Yes, please, I want it. I know I would have been one of those young girls who asked for it because that's what the culture was telling me to do. And so I sort of wanted to go straight out to Kenya and run around going, look, even those of you who are saying you want it, you're not having it, you're coming with me, which is what you always do when you see these kind of films. But it frightened me so much, the idea that we ask an 8-year-old if she wants to be mutilated, and if she, you know, out of lack of knowledge and understanding and cultural whatever, says yes, we go, oh, well, that's okay, that's a choice. And that has to be challenged, I think.
And also, even if she says, yes, I want it or I don't want it, it's your mom who's telling you it's very important for you to be part of this society. You know, your mom, there's nobody closer than your mom. So, you know, I can't say your mom is doing it to hurt you, because your mom wants you to belong to that society as well. So even if she doesn't want it, you know, as a teenager or as, you know, be a young girl, I think it's, you know, the peer pressure comes from your family, and then, you know, when she gets older, nobody will marry her. You know, one person said her mother-in-law, her in-laws would not come and eat in her house, and they would not come to her house until she gets circumcised. So, you know, even at the latter age, they still want to go through it because of that. So just to make her peace. So the peer pressure continues.
Okay,
and then there was that, sorry, now there's just one more thing. There was that amazing moment where that other guy was saying that he wouldn't marry a woman who had been subject to FGM. And there's that amazing thing where people say, oh, well, you know, young girls feel they have to have this procedure, otherwise no one will want to marry them. And then they say, no, it's okay, someone will want to marry you. And you sort of want to turn around to them and go, also, you don't have to get married. But you know, that part of it is, that's a lot way further down the line, right? But it's difficult not to want to change that as well, and to challenge that at the first instance too.
Okay, I think we're going to move on to the audience Q&A now. We have got a roving mic, so if you could wait, if you could put your hand up, please, and then wait for the mic to get to you, that would be great. Okay, fantastic. Yes, just up there. Up there. Is there an issue with the mic?
Yeah. You want to take this one?
We can take this one and then.
Hi.
Yeah, it's working. It's working.
Hello?
Yep.
Oh, it is working. I wanted to ask about, I was interested to know that in the film they mentioned it was mostly men outside the clinic, and Kate also mentioned that in the 40 Days for Life vigil it was mostly men. Is this something that you see across the board? And if it is, why do you think that is?
Okay, Rebecca, do you want to take
Do you
it
want to
first
do
from
first,
that
Rebecca?
point, and then Kate?
It is mostly men. I'm not sure why, especially in the South, but a lot of church leaders traditionally have been men, middle-aged white men, which is very interesting because
Those middle-aged white men.
a lot of the women that come into the clinics happen to be immigrants or on the lower end are mostly men. I could venture to guess, I haven't done a lot of research, but at the idea of religion and a lot of, especially in the South and the US, a very patriarchal view and still a very, very heavy influence of male dominance in society. But I don't want to make that statement without saying it's just a guess.
Yeah, it's mostly men. It's not all men, but it's mostly men. And interestingly, they are aware of that. And when they do get women who join their ranks, they do tend to sort of push them forwards and you know what I mean? They're very keen to, oh, look, we've got a woman with us, as if, you know, it's kind of like, you know, I'm not racist, here's my black friend. You know, it's just that kind of, I'm not being sexist, there's one woman with us. It's just, and there are two reasons why it's mostly men. Firstly, it's because when you've grown up without a uterus, it's much easier to have this attitude of like, well, here's what you should do if this happens, and here's what you should do. You know, every woman in this room, every woman in the world has, at some point in her life, even if she's not had a crisis pregnancy, she's had a period that started 2 days late, and she's had a moment of going, oh, is this okay? What am I going to do if, you know, she's had that thought cross through her mind, that momentary panic, and she's more likely to have heard about her friends who've been in that situation. So that's one big reason. And the other big reason is that, frankly, having 8 hours a day to stand outside a clinic is kind of a luxury. You know, I've got a pay gap and rape culture and caring responsibilities as millions of women around the world do. And I don't really have a spare 14 hours a day to stand around outside somebody's clinic being a complete pain in the backside. I think you must live in quite a big world of privilege if you've got a spare 14 hours a day to go and harass women. And I think the reality is that just for socioeconomic reasons, there aren't that many women who really have the time and the resources to do that. And remember that a lot of the funding comes out of the churches, and they're often very male-run churches. And I know so many people who go to church, especially, for example, in Northern Ireland, both sides of the sectarian divide.
Can you just explain there the situation with Northern Ireland? Because I think a lot of people don't necessarily know.
So abortion is basically illegal in Northern Ireland and
Despite
in the
the fact that
Republic.
it's a part of the UK.
Yes, exactly, which is really weird. If you break your leg in Liverpool, you don't expect someone to go, well, you're from Hackney, I can't help you. You expect them to say, you're a British citizen and you will get the same medical treatment wherever in the UK you are. But the reality is that the 1967 Abortion Act never applied to Northern Ireland. And the situation is that every week about 40 women travel over from Northern Ireland to parts of the UK, part of mainland as it were, and about 100 a week travel over from the Republic of Ireland as well. So we've got about 140 a week in, they call it sort of the hidden diaspora, coming over to access those services in the UK, paying, in the rest of the UK, paying £600 to £2,000 plus their travel, their accommodation, getting time off work, finding an excuse to tell their families, all those other things that go along with it. And as with the US and as with so many other places, there is an organisation called the Abortion Support Network that exists to help women doing that. And there are organisations all around the world that do this, that help women travel from places where it's illegal to places where it's legal. And on top of that, I mean, the amazing thing is that the story that you see in the film is so depressing, and the reality of what's going on in the UK, both legally and in terms of harassment outside clinics, is incredibly depressing. And globally, there are a lot of rights being rolled back, and there are some being granted, but a lot being rolled back. But in spite of all this, the global picture is actually incredibly positive. Over the last decade or so, the number of women dying as a result of illegal abortion has completely plummeted. It's pretty much halved, and that has happened for one reason and one reason only, which is the increasingly widespread availability of early-term medical abortion tablets from online websites. And of course, there are unscrupulous places that will sell you aspirin for a lot of money. But if you hear about anybody who's trying to get an illegal abortion, who lives somewhere where it's illegal and is trying to get an abortion, please direct them to www.womenonweb.org. And Rebecca Gompertz, who's a doctor in the Netherlands, will do an online extensive questionnaire, question and answer with them, make sure they're suitable, and then she will post them in an unmarked envelope, those early, safe abortion tablets.
Okay.
Yes, it's the same thing as women on water. Yeah.
Okay, great. So thank you very much. Next question. There's a question up at the back.
Oh,
Was there one down here? Yeah, fantastic. And then if you could go to the back afterwards, that'd be great. Thank you.
Hello. I just wanted to ask about the abortion film. I have read about Roe versus Wade, but I'm not completely clear about what it involved. And also, again, the Mississippi law that when they were talking about admitting, I didn't really understand that either.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, so could you explain Roe versus Wade, and then what's happened in Mississippi to effectively turn that backwards?
Sure. So Roe versus Wade was a Supreme Court decision that basically legalized abortion in the U.S., but also, and very importantly, it's, you should note that it gave a lot of the rights to make laws to the states. So specifically, and it just happened the 40th anniversary of Roe.
So it's 1973.
Yes, of Roe v. Wade. And if you remember in the film, you see huge crowds of people around with all of their signs of the mutilated fetuses. That was during the 40th anniversary in front of the Mississippi Clinic. So they kind of swarmed on it because it would have been or will be the first clinic in a state in the U.S. to close. So they really rallied around it to try and get it to close as soon as possible. In Mississippi, and what happens all over the U.S. in specific states are what's called trap laws. And what they do is the state legislature, from very conservative bases, pass laws about regulations, medical regulations in every state. So specifically in Mississippi, they've passed laws about the hallways in clinics have to be at least 4 feet wide for gurneys to get through. And if your hallways aren't that way and you can't afford to build a brand new clinic, your clinic has to close. The specific law that I was talking about in this film gained a lot of press in the US because it would have been the first state to not have an abortion clinic. And that was, if you are a practicing abortion doctor in Mississippi, you had to have what's called referral rights to a hospital. In case there's an emergency, you are allowed, or you're able to follow the patient to the hospital to continue their care. And this clinic in particular, applied for referral rights to 7 different hospitals in the area and were denied by all of them. For specific reasons, like there was a Catholic hospital that denied them flat out, said we don't believe in abortion, we're not going to give you the rights. And other, after like sending in 100 plus page applications, would say, you know, we just can't handle that kind of protesting or press. So every hospital turned them down. And that was in July of 2012, what they were slated to close. But they, because of Roe versus Wade, full circle, you can't, the states can pass as many laws as they want, but you can't make it impossible for women in the US to get an abortion. So with an injunction in 2012, they have been allowed to remain open until the appeals court decides what happens.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, so there was a question at the back. Yes?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Mine's kind of more of like a question for the 4 of you and a bit of a statement, I guess. In all 3 films, like we were just talking about how it's often men, you know, putting these views, their kind of views on women. But a lot of the time, which is scary in today's society, is that it's women putting these views on women. I mean, with the FGM, it's often their grandmothers or their mothers doing it. With the second film, it's women in society who are putting these views of beauty on other women. And then in the abortion as well, I mean, it is a lot of women as well who are there as protesting it. And I kind of just wanted to know your thoughts from all 4 of you really on why you think it is that it's kind of us against each other in a way.
I mean, okay, well, I'll kick off. I mean, my view on that would be, why wouldn't they be subjected to exactly the same laws, exactly the same pressure, exactly the same influences that the men are? So it's not, I don't find it particularly surprising in a way, because we're subject to exactly this, you know, we see everything else that the men see, so why would we not be, we're not kind of immune to sexism just because we're women, or immune to those messages. It takes a lot for us to kind of stand up against them as well. But Elizabeth.
I think it's also a matter of power, isn't it? Power and matter of status. the grandmother and or the circumciser, to show the power, to pass it over to the next generation as well, to make sure, everything, by the end of the day, FGM happens just to make the man happy. The woman will be good enough for the man when she's married. But then, as you said, it's the mom and it's the grandmother and the aunts who do that. And if you talk to the men, sometimes they tell you it's a women's business, so we don't know what's happening there. It's not up to us. But still, it's a matter of power and status, and also to make sure the tradition or the culture has to continue.
I think personally that religion plays a huge role in that aspect. And really, I think women are mothers, and I think a lot of women, especially, I don't know about the UK, but definitely in the US, mothers are the ones that are the women that are protesting because they feel like they've had a child, they, every child would have a right to be born, but it's really rooted in religion and I think a little bit of economic status as well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. I think that patriarchy wouldn't work if it was just a matter of, being very open about, right, here's a load of guys telling a load of women what to do. Like, we would all just turn around and be like, that's nonsense. But in order for people to be oppressed, one of the things that has to happen is that the people who are being oppressed have to be convinced that they're somehow benefiting from it and that they want it and that they should help to perpetuate it. That is the nature of oppression. Without that, it's impossible really to oppress people for more than about 15 minutes. And it surprises me actually a great deal that a lot is made about this, in the sense that people constantly tell me, oh well, women's magazines are just as bad as men's magazines. Like, I'm supposed to be surprised about this, or that exactly, people point out to me that often FGM is something that where the circumcisers can be women, and this kind of thing. That I should be surprised that there are women in our society who are not feminists, who are not standing up to this. And there is an absolutely fascinating book you can read that is, I guess, a good century or so old, but there is an amazing collection of essays written by people who were slaves about how brilliant it is to be a slave. And these essays and articles written at the time of slavery were put in every newspaper. The people who wrote them were given rewards and special treatment and were put in charge of their peers and this kind of stuff. And it's really frightening when you look back from the 21st century and go, well, obviously, it seems so obvious that these people must have hated the situation they were in, and yet the rewards for helping to be a part of perpetuating it were really, really high. And whenever I end up on a TV or radio debate and the person sat next to me is somebody who has a really successful career as a Tory MP or writing for the Daily Mail, you just think, there you go, here is a woman sat. Not what she is receiving is the rewards of perpetuating the oppression of her own kind, as it were, and when you see it like that, it's quite shocking, but it's very easy not to see it when you're within that oppression itself.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think we've got time for one more question.
Hi, I've got the microphone, so it's going to be me.
Okay, go for it.
I'd just like to ask Elizabeth, a couple of things. Thank you very much for the FGM film. It was absolutely... it was so painful to watch. It was incredibly painful to watch, but obviously much more painful to be part of. Is there a particular age that young girls have to be in order to have that procedure? Because one of the very powerful sentences that was used was, if this was happening to adults and they could consent in a more knowing, more experienced way, would it still go on in that way? And do we have anything in this country do we have any sort of refuge for women who want to escape that in this country, other than, I'm sure some of them would go to Women's Aid, but do we have a young people's refuge for people who want to escape FGM here?
That's a really good question. FGM takes place in Africa. Around 28 countries practice FGM. Most of them is a rite of passage, so it's a specific age. The reason why they do that is that the girl is ready, mostly about 10 years old, 10, 11. She's ready to get married because she can handle and manage the house, so she's ready to marry. So it's about early teenage, 11, 12. But what's happening now in most countries, I can refer Sierra Leone and even Tanzania, the age is getting younger and younger because there is a lot of campaign education taking place. So the younger they are, the better, so they wouldn't question about it. But originally, traditionally, it should be when they are ready to get married, which is about 11, 12. And then they have to get married as soon as they get through circumcision, which is in 2 years' time, if they, especially in Korea tribe. Once the girl is going through FGM, if she's not married in the next 2 years, which means nobody wants her, so they give her to an old man as an extra wife because nobody wants her. So
you're campaigning against that as well, aren't you,
yes,
Forward?
Yes.
Just tell us about some of the work you're doing, both kind of in terms of on the ground. Yeah.
Because FGM and child marriage is related, especially in the Korea tribe, what we see is the girls have no choice. So, they marry someone who they don't know, and also, there is a lot of, and it's just for 5 cows, or in terms of number of cows. So it's just like a commodity exchange for the man. And what we learned a lot, I have some research, we did a good study in 2008, 2009. What we learned is we asked them, okay, tell me if I'm a girl in this tribe, I'm 5, so tell me what my life would look like. So literally her childhood ends up when she's 5 years old. Mm-hmm. So from 5, she starts supporting the mom, she starts helping to some extent. When she's 10, the mother could leave the whole household to the girl because she can manage, she can handle. So which means she's ready to get married. So what happens is after that, she goes to the husband, and most of them, they also suffer from a lot of abuse and domestic violence, and it's kind of their day-to-day life. Mm-hmm. And they might go, most of them go to primary school, but then that's the end of the story.
And again, can you explain the link between this and poverty?
Poverty, it makes it worse because the girl's family will get some cows, which is means of life. So they get some cows from the husband's side, so it makes it worse. But it's more to do, in addition to that, they're not educated. That's what's happening the last few hundreds of years. So it continues. So it's poverty. It makes it worse, but it's still the tradition. Your other question, in terms of UK, if there is any refuge, there is no refuge. We get a lot of calls, especially from girls, and they need support. We try as much as we can to counsel them, to give them support, and when we can't, we refer them to Women's Aid or other organizations. But there is no. If a girl says, I'm at risk, sorry, my mom is taking me for holiday, all we can do is link them up with the social offices. Mm-hmm. But there is no refuge, unfortunately. The fund is very, very limited.
It's all about funding, basically.
Yeah.
There is no funding. So the NSPCC now has a dedicated FGM line, which children can ring. Mm-hmm. But absolutely, and as you were saying exactly earlier, one of the main issues is that you're effectively asking an 11-year-old girl to report her parents to the police and to have herself taken into care. Yeah. That's at the moment, that's where we are.
Yes, but there are some positive examples in the UK. Because of now most teachers are aware of what's happening. Nurses, midwives are aware of more than compared to 10 years ago. So we get some phone calls from some teachers, for example. I saw this girl, she told me that she's a bit worried, she's going for holiday, so is there anyone who can do something about it? So we get such kind of phone calls.
So are teachers trained, or doctors, nurses trained?
With our limited capacity,
so you do the training.
We do that, the training, but what we are pushing for the government is there should be more support for the teachers, more support for the nurses and the midwives, all people who are, surrounding the girl's life. The more they know about it, and it's not just they know about it, also they need to know how to support the girl, because, they need to know what's the system, what can they do, what's next about this. So there is no structured system to support the girl, like if this happens to you, you are a UK citizen, this shouldn't happen to you, you have the right, and it's illegal, so this is the way you can escape. But unfortunately, I think there is limited support.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, I think we have to finish for the day now. Yes, we have to finish this section now. So please, thank you very much for staying, and thank you for some great questions, and please thank you, panel.